Back in the day, before streaming, before CDs, we listened to music on albums. A vinyl disc spinning 33 and a third revolutions per minute brought us great music one side at a time. 20 or so minutes of music, 4 or 5 songs usually, that created a single listening experience. This format exposed us to other songs of the artist, not just the hits, and often flowed in an order that was created to build and maintain or mold a musical experience for the listener.
Sideshow brings musical experiences from the past to life today. Here, we discuss and review individual sides of record albums we have grown to appreciate and hope you will too. Welcome to The Sideshow.
All right, welcome to The Sideshow. We are continuing with our live albums week, and today Mike has a live album. Why don't you let the audience know, Mike, what we're going to be talking about today?
Well, I'm going to be talking about one of the first records, like the first LP rock albums that I ever got, which is Deep Purple Made in Japan, Side 3. Is what we're going to talk about.
Great one.
And I'll get this out of the way. Here's a copy of the album. You may be able to see it's a little worn. On the back cover here is kind of focused on Ritchie Blackmore. It's hard to see because the album is sort of worn. This album was given to me, or was purchased on around my 14th birthday at the Woodfield Mall in Schaumburg, Illinois. We were down from Appleton visiting our aunt and uncle, and what do you want for your birthday? Went into a record store and I pointed at that, and Aunt Carolyn bought it for me, which was about 48 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, and everywhere I've lived since then, that album has been there. But in any case, I was interested at that time in I liked hard rock, and I was looking for albums. I got people that told me, oh, you got to check out Deep Purple, and you'd heard Smoke on the Water on the radio, and it was a name that you heard, in magazines and stuff. They would have the record club, and they'd show pictures of albums, and like for example, the In Rock album with the Mount Rushmore motif was something that I'd seen. And so, but in any case, the first actual record that I took home and, peeled off the shrink wrap and pulled it out and put it on the turntable by Deep Purple was made in Japan. Deep Purple, very interesting band, in my opinion. They were formed in 1968, and basically their final release was in 1975. So not a real lengthy tenure as a band. And I mean, there have been some reunion type things since then, but no real, what I consider to be real Deep Purple. And there were 4 different band lineups over the course of those 7 or 8 years. And the soul of the band really kind of changed with each of these changes. And the second lineup is the lineup that performed the concerts where these in Japan, where this album was recorded. And just to focus on that part of the band's history, they'd had a kind of a hit in the first incarnation. A cover of a song. I don't recall the name of the original artist, but the song "Hush" was a radio song, and distinctive for the most part because of the organ sound. The organist who remained with the band during all of the incarnations was named John Lord, but I'm not aware of any real success that they had to the extent that I was ever interested in it. But 2 of the members of the band, the the vocalist and the bass player ended up leaving the lineup, and two new members, the vocalist named Ian Gillian and the bass player named Roger Glover. The original drummer, his name is Ian Pace, who stayed with the band basically during their entire existence. The organist that I mentioned, John Lord, who also was with the band during their entire existence, and their guitar player, who up until the very end remained with the band, named Ritchie Blackmore. And so that was the lineup for this period. And the first album that they released in that incarnation was kind of a strange thing, you might say, but it was recorded with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra at the Royal Albert Hall in London in 1969, and it was called Concerto for Group and Orchestra. I have never taken the time to listen to it, and so I really can't comment on it. It looked like it'd be something kind of like, Pink Floyd's Adam Hart Mother, the first side, or something like that. I don't know, but I just, for whatever reason, just never chose to get rid of the 40 minutes to listen to that.
Well, and I think that is a really good illustration of very early on, Deep Purple was still not really settled into this niche of what they would help define as, as heavy metal music. Even the conception for the band was this a band called Roundabout that wouldn't even be a consistent lineup. It's that kind of hopefully a super group that members would come in and they play for a little while and then they'd leave, a roundabout of songs. And John Lord, the organist, was brought in with this idea of what they would be. In fact, very early on, it was called Roundabout. And Ritchie Blackmore was brought in during this time. And in a conversation, early on, Ritchie Blackmore had said they were really looking to be a Vanilla Fudge clone type band. And so that is not what we now know, and where they had such massive success as a heavy metal band. And this orchestral work that you're talking about is another example of that, where kind of let's really kind of explore a little bit here. But it became pretty clear that they wanted to fairly early go into this more heavier set. And one of the reasons that the initial vocalist was kind of moved out was because that really wasn't their style and wasn't really going to match. Songs like Hush were much more doable, as opposed to, some of the vocal performances that we'll be talking about today.
Well, and you mentioned kind of what the band had in mind for itself, and certainly what Ritchie Blackmore wanted to do at that point was more like hard rock.
Yeah.
And and there had been hard rock, earlier in the '60s, like Cream, Jimi Hendrix, The Who, bands like that. But around this time, and Deep Purple is sometimes characterized around this time as being part of the unholy trinity, which were Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple.
Deep Purple.
And the next album that they put out in 1970 was called In Rock, which as I kind of alluded to earlier, had the five members of the band portrayed kind of like on a Mount Rushmore motif. And that album had kind of the basic sound down. Songs like Speed King and Child in Time, for example. Heavy guitar. John Lord's organ, very prevalent in the sound in a way that was, there was no keyboard player in Black Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And while John Paul Jones in Led Zeppelin was actually an excellent keyboard player, the keyboard sound in Led Zeppelin's music didn't dominate back in the early 70s the way that, Deep Purple, the John Lord organ sound is just part of their sound. And so they kind of took their place in that sort of heavy metal pantheon, or whatever you want to call it, at that time, and really excelled. And the In Rock album, it's a great early '70s hard rock album,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not, it's not like Led Zeppelin 4 or anything like that, but it's just a very good solid album. And around the time that this lineup of the band was starting to coalesce, they were focusing, in addition to their studio recordings, to their live performances, and they wanted to they wanted to excel in their live performance. And so they were touring after the release of In Rock a lot, and being received well.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up recording another studio album in 1971. It was released, called Fireball, and that album was not received as well as, I mean, it wasn't panned, but it was not received as well as In Rock. And the band members didn't necessarily think as highly of it either. And part of the reason that they gave for that was that they were doing all this touring, but at the same time, because they were starting to taste some success, the record company was like, you got to put out another album, you got to put out another album. And they didn't really take the breathing room that they felt would have been better for purposes of sitting down, writing out their songs, getting it together, and recording them. And so while you don't read, oh, it's a bad album, it's not not as received as well as the album before it, nor the one that followed. On Fireball, it's worth mentioning, they released a single in England, "Strange Kind of Woman," and it wasn't on the UK release of Fireball, but when Fireball was released in the United States, it did have the single "Strange Kind of Woman" on it, and because "Strange Kind of Woman" is on side 3 of the live album, Made in Japan. But in any case, after Fireball, the band had really kind of found its footing. They were very confident as a live act, and they came up with a classic in 1971 with their studio album Machine Head. And it had songs that basically became part of their live repertoire forever, or for as long as Deep Purple was going to be playing. I mean, you and I saw a reincarnated version of Deep Purple back in, like, about 2007.
Yeah,
that neck of the woods at Rockfest, and they played all these. They played, Highway Star, Smoke on the Water, Lazy, Space Truckin'. I mean, those became 4 classic rock
standards.
Standards. Yeah. And they played all 4 of them in 2007. They played all 4 of them on Made in Japan. And they just a classic album. And those 4 songs, I mean, in my humble opinion, any self-respecting classic rock fan is familiar with all 4 of those songs. So it's just a big hit, a great album, and they were flying. They had the pliers. And in any case, they were touring all over the world. They toured in Japan in 1972, and were still sort of riding the wave of Machine Head. And they played 3 concerts in Japan, 2 in Osaka, 1 at the Budokan Theater in Tokyo. And the band wasn't necessarily interested in putting out a live album at that time, but someone from the record company end of things, probably in Japan, because they were very popular in Japan.
Yeah, they were, just for whatever reason, the Japanese market was really going crazy with them, and I think someone wanted to take advantage of that.
Yeah, exactly. And they were skeptical, but they agreed that the concerts could be recorded for purposes of a live album. But they wanted to be they wanted to have final say. Like no tapes will get, released as an album without our okay. And they also only wanted it to be released in Japan. They didn't want it to be a worldwide, release in the United States and in Europe and whatnot. But and I don't know exactly how it came to pass, but it got released anyway. And with
the record company did it anyway. They didn't.
I don't know if it was necessarily against their will. May have been. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that question. But in any case, it got released everywhere. And made in Japan, while on the one hand self-explanatory, this record was made in Japan. We were playing in Osaka and Tokyo. But I mean, back in those days, nowadays it's made in China, or made in you look at your shirt and it's made in Vietnam or something. Well, back in the 70s, you turn over something, it would say made in Japan. Yeah. That was your camera, Nikon cameras and stuff like that, whatever, they were made in Japan. So in any case, despite the fact that the band was kind of lukewarm, or if not cool, on the idea of releasing this album, it's a good thing they did, in my opinion, because I believe this is the definitive Deep Purple album.
It's not only did it capture it captured them at that time period. And I agree with you. They were just coming off of an incredibly successful studio album, but I think it also really captured. I mean, I like to go back to when we were listening to this when we were younger, and as we've talked about on this show, the ability to sit and look at an album while you're listening to it. The photo on the cover of this album, I mean, it looks like live rock and roll. You've got Ian Gillan, who's playing the congas, and his hair is kind of down as he's shaking it. You can see John Lord, no shirt, on the drum kit. You see Ritchie Blackmore, and he's kind of tossing his head as he's jumping off the ground while holding his guitar, and his hair just does this perfect kind of thing on the side, and then you've got these Marshall amps behind them. It just looks like rock and roll. And we got this album, well, you got the album, but I mean, we were listening to it at a fairly young age, and that became kind of a standard of that's what rock and roll looks like. We hadn't been to a big concert yet at that time, and the back cover the same. You look at it, and you could see how crazy the Japanese audience was for them. I think it's very interesting. You look at that picture on the back where these Japanese people are standing up. Security's got to be restraining them. They're really loving it. Deep Purple came out with another album later called Made in Europe, and they have a very similar picture on the back. And all the people are just kind of sitting there in their chairs, barely able to clap. I mean, the difference between the two is striking in that. So the album itself really helped to capture, like, oh man, this is Deep Purple, man. I mean, that we're listening to.
With a combination of the wear on the album and the light in this room, I mean, holding it up and the quality of my computer camera, I'd hold it up, but it wouldn't really convey what you're describing. So I wouldn't do that.
Just real quickly, I've got, probably because this I acquired later in life, it's not as worn as yours. You've been listening to the heck out of this thing. But again, just the look of the band there, and especially Ritchie Blackmore here, and the way that he looks as he's kind of jumping off the ground. It is just, this picture really just captures it real well. I love the physical album of this here.
And as live music, and I didn't necessarily get this because I wanted a live album. It was just the album that was there, and I assumed it was a double album. It had more material than just what was on Machine Head or whatnot. But in any case, this was the album that where I kind of immersed myself into Deep Purple and their music. And so the live versions of the songs are the ones that I prefer. I've listened to Machine Head. I've got a compact disc of Machine Head and an LP, and um and everything. But if I'm going to listen to Deep Purple, I mean, it's this album that I go to. And as far as live hard rock, I mean, this album was the gold standard of live hard rock in the 70s. Like Led Zeppelin, they didn't release a live album until The Song Remains the Same, which came out in like 1976. This album came out in either 1972 or early 1973. And Song Remains the Same was a very mediocre live album. I mean, it was good material, but poorly rendered, in my opinion. And then that's not an uncommon opinion about Led Zeppelin's Song Remain the Same, and they were very well regarded as a live band around the time that Deep Purple recorded Made in Japan. Led Zeppelin were very well regarded as a live album, or as a live band. But they hadn't released a live album at that point, and the one they released later in the 70s just was kind of no good. Black Sabbath, they didn't release a live album until like 1980. I don't think Ozzy Osbourne was even still in the band when they released a live album. And there had been, for example, like The Who Live at Leeds, which was recorded in 1970. And that is an excellent live album, and that's hard rock. But I don't know, The Who is just a truly unique band in the way that they created their music and in the way they played off of each other, and the combination of Pete Townsend and John Entwistle and Keith Moon, and Pete Townsend wasn't the guitar hero sort of guitar player like Ritchie Blackmore or Jimmy Page were. Just the way he played guitar, he just had a different approach than that. And so while that is an excellent album, it's a different type of hard rock. That doesn't necessarily mesh as well. And so this and like the Allman Brothers Live at the Fillmore was a big live album in the early 70s, but that was not the sort of hard rock heavy metal type music. And so this is the gold standard for live hard rock in the early 70s as far as I'm concerned. And something I didn't mention, I got to go back a little bit to Machine Head, where 4 of the better songs on Made in Japan came from. I mentioned that they had difficulty in recording the album Fireball because they were going into the studio for relatively quick periods of time in between having to get back and leave to go on tours and whatnot. Well, as many people are aware, they were recording Machine Head in Montreux, Switzerland, at a casino where live performances occurred. And while they were in Switzerland recording the album, they had a mobile unit, not unlike the Rolling Stones mobile unit, which it might have been the one they used. But there was a fire that occurred when a audience member during a Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention concert shot off a flare gun. And that the story is the lyrical content for Smoke on the Water. But they were they needed a place to tour. And so they ended up at the Grand Hotel, and like they were in the hallways of this hotel with their equipment, this mobile equipment that was brought in. And I don't know
trying to cut a record,
trying to get the record out, and it was empty, cold, and damp. And so the creation of what are, in my opinion, the primary songs on a live album occurred under those circumstances. And while they may have had trouble with Fireball, those problems did not affect the quality of the music at all that they were able to produce. And side 3 of Made in Japan, which is a side that I've selected because I think it's the best side on the album, it does contain one of the Machine Head songs, Lazy, but it doesn't, Smoke on the Water, kind of their most known song
Yeah.
is on side 2. They do like an 18-20 minute version of Space Truckin' to close out the album on side 4. Apparently, after Machine Head, they regularly opened their concerts with Highway Star, and Highway Star is the first track on side 1 of Made in Japan, and that's one of the great opening songs on a live album, in my humble opinion, Highway Star. But side 3, I mean, if you're just looking for a slab of just in your face, let it all hang out, heavy metal, side 3 is what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. It's 2 tracks. The first track on side 3 is Strange Kind of Woman, the single that was released and included on the American release of Fireball. And lyrically, we don't really need to spend a lot of time. It's about a guy that falls for a hooker. Mm-hmm. And it's really about that simple. But it really kind of showcased the lead vocalist as being part of the band, not just for singing the lyrics. And at the beginning of the song, I mean, just as soon as the third side starts, you get this. He goes, Ian Gillan goes, "All right," and then a band comes in, and it's just the drums, bass, guitar, and this organ, these organ chords playing the song. And it's pretty basic hard rock, nothing flashy about it. But for example, the drum rolls between the verses, particularly right between the verses and the guitar solos. Mm-hmm. Just really nothing flashy, nothing spectacular. We're not talking about Keith Moon here, but just that little extra bit of drumming to give the song a little character. And Ian Paice was kind of a poor man's John Bonham. On the one hand, I mean, I think that there's no question that John Bonham was a more powerful drummer who played more of a role in the success of his band, Led Zeppelin, that he was in. But that's a pretty high standard as far as hard rock drumming is concerned. And when you watch, and there is video on YouTube available of Deep Purple performing live during this time period, and Ian Paice was one of those kind of original sort of wild man drummers in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned the guitar solos. Ritchie Blackmore, certainly by the time of Machine Head, I mean, he just came up with these guitar solos that were just, they just came out of nowhere, but they seemed like they were just the classic rock guitar solo. And there was a way he had of playing, moving from playing rhythm into his leads that was not unlike as a good friend of mine and I once determined that Ritchie Blackmore is the Jerry Garcia of heavy metal. And while and that idea might be a little half-baked, or actually maybe too baked is maybe a better. But in any case, his guitar leads just kind of roll out into the space with lubrication. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of struggling to try and describe it, but there's just a smoothness and like a ball of mercury that changes its shape as it's moving along, that his guitar leads have.
Well, and there's a part of this song you talked about, showcasing the vocals. I mean, what you have going on in the middle of this song is there's a back and forth between the guitar and the vocals, where you kind of lose track about who's mimicking who as you're listening to it. But you'll hear something from the guitar, kind of a do 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 do, and then you'll hear this ooh ooh ooh, and the they're going back and forth. It's almost like a dueling between the guitar and the vocals. Again, you've got to pay attention to which is the vocal here and which is the guitar, because they really, in key and everything, can kind of stay with each other. And then you can feel it fall back more into guitar, almost an improvisational thing. It's hard to believe that was improvisational, because they would have had to rehearse to some point to get it so right about the way that it sounds between the guitar and the vocals. But it's just a very interesting kind of interlude in there that I think showcases what you're talking about Ritchie Blackmore's way to just kind of put this music into the air with his guitar, and the vocal abilities of Ian Gillan to be able to almost be another musical instrument in the band, as opposed to someone that's just singing the lyrics. And just to go real quickly back to the song itself, I really like the way that it starts. I think you pointed out it's very straightforward. It's a steady kind of rolling start to the song. It's the kind of song that a construction crew would put on when they came back for lunch, because you got to get back to work, and it is just, I want you, I need you, I gotta be near you. It moves forward on a steady pace, but that is, you hear that guitar with each with each step there. So really great kind of start to this side that gets pretty musically interesting as it gets into this vocal and guitar stuff.
When there are two full blown guitar solos in the song, and I like the way that you described the interplay towards the end between Gillan singing and Blackmore playing the guitar. I guess in my mind, that it's Blackmore that's playing the notes, because it's much easier to recreate the notes with a voice than to figure out, well, which notes is he. So I assume that was the case, but I don't know. I mean, if someone that has played guitar as often as Ritchie Blackmore, I mean, who is as intuitive apparently a guitar player as he was, and they were working on these things together on stage, and could give visual cues to each other as to what they were doing. And I agree with you. Improvisation isn't the right word to describe what they were doing, but it had a spontaneity to it.
Yes.
And it was something where they were interacting beyond the studio track that they were performing.
And I'd also say that it was entertaining. There's plenty of musical jams and explorations that can go on in a live concert where you can almost sense the audience just waiting for this part to be done so we can get back to the music, right? It's okay, this guy's gonna measure his penis here with by playing on this guitar in a weird way, but it's not entertaining. This is it's musically entertaining. It flows along with the rhythm of the song. It's interesting. It's kind of fascinating the way that they're doing it. Yet it keeps the song moving, and it's entertaining to listen to. So, which is one of the reasons that I like the song, even though they go into something that's a little unusual here.
Mentioning the vocals, at the very end, I mean, Gillan just
yeah, yes,
and just this sort of sustained, sort of a cross between a shout and a scream.
I wouldn't want to try and karaoke it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's how he ends the song, and so it's just a straight rock song. But it keeps your toe tapping. It's got a certain hookiness to the vocal, to the lyrics, and the music. I think of it as just kind of a definitive hard rock song from the early 70s. Nothing special about it. Like I said, I mean, I don't really think we need to spend any more time talking about the lyrics.
Yeah.
It's about a guy falls for a hooker, and I spent my money and I took my turn. It's kind of kind of sums it up. But it just if someone was going to ask me, well, what's the definitive hard rock song from the early '70s, I wouldn't say this. But if someone said, well, what's a definitive?
Yeah.
This would be the sort of thing that I would point to. And they stretch it out, but not too much.
Yeah.
I mean, the two songs on this side are each about 9 or 10 minutes long. Long enough to be longer than it's going to be on the studio album, but not so long where, like you say, can we get back to a song here?
Yeah.
And as far as the interaction with the audience, after all the screaming and vocalizing that Ian Gillan has done, this song ends, and he just to the audience goes, "Hey!" And you hear this, "Hey!" back,
Hey!
"Hey! Hey! Hey!" And just
it goes on for a little bit from there. Yeah.
Just to no purpose other than just, hey, this is a rock concert. Let's get into it and blah blah blah. And then he he introduces the next song, and next one off of Machine Head I think it's called Lazy. This one, Lazy.
Yeah.
Kind of like he's not sure what it's called.
Yeah.
And Lazy, another song with very self-explanatory lyrics that we don't need to spend much time on. But the beginning of Lazy and on the studio version on Machine Head, there's kind of a keyboard-dominated jam at the beginning before the guitar comes in and then the song proper. And but on this album, on Made in Japan, the live version, it starts out with what I don't know what device John Lord, the keyboard player, was using, but it was some sort of keyboard with synthesizer tweaks. Is the best I can come up with. An actual musician would probably be able to identify the specific technology that he was using, but it starts out with just a pitch, and it starts to change and get louder and lower, and then eventually he starts playing a very raw sounding organ, and it's kind of noisy. It's sort of like the keyboard player getting a chance to do a little showing off before the song starts, and there's nothing particularly special about it. And you're wondering where it's going to go.
No,
and then
I'd actually say that it's kind of snappy. It's not bang your head. It's almost snap your fingers, kind of type sound that you're hearing. It kind of picks up speed a little bit, but very very keyboard oriented. It's not heavy. Like I say, it's almost snappy at this point in the song.
Well, the first real music in the beginning of this song is when he goes into kind of a Louie Louie.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it's not kind of.
Yeah.
He goes into Louie Louie. Dun 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 dun. And then there's more noise basically. But then it starts. That's when he starts to go into the keyboard jam from the from the studio recording, and then it definitely is kind of snappy. It's not necessarily. It's kind of bluesy. Got something to it, but it's not a hard rock song yet.
Yeah.
And so he's playing this stuff for a minute or two. I don't know exactly how long, but then he starts to kind of smooth out a little bit, and then Ritchie Blackmore comes in, and again it's just kind of snappy. It's not he's not coming in hard, and they're kind of playing back and forth to each other a little bit, and it really kind of neat. The drums and the bass are sort of hanging back at that point. And at one point, they kind of they're getting almost quieter and playing a couple notes back and forth between Blackmore on the guitar and Lord on the organ. But then Blackmore comes in just on the guitar with what I guess I'd call the lazy riff.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays it a couple of times, and then you get some bump from the drummer and the bass player. Bump.
Yeah.
You know, doo doo doo. And that dun 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 dun
Mm-hmm.
dun 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 dun
Yeah.
dun dun. And then he plays it loud.
Yeah.
And then when he comes to the end of the note, the drums and the bass just come in, and Blackmore takes off on this solo, and they are fucking cruising. I mean, they are rocking out in just
Yeah.
letting it all hang out. I mean, it is in my opinion the best moment on the album. You know, they've had this, the keyboard solo kind of thing, and then some guitar keyboard monkeying around, and then they sort of tease the beginning of the song. But now, blast off.
Yeah.
And I mean, and they were cooking. I mean, and I could just imagine what the crowd was doing at that moment. I mean, it's just a great heavy metal. I think hard rock is probably a better label for Deep Purple than heavy metal. Just a great moment. I mean, you know, there were times where this would play in the car. I'd be driving somewhere, Beth and I, and when it would reach that point where the whole band just kicked in, and I'd start every time.
It
was that kind of song.
There is absolutely that moment. You know, kind of looking back on it, because you don't really know where the song is going when you're just listening to it to the beginning. And as it turns out, you have, okay, we're gonna kind of play around and get a little warmed up here, and kind of bring, okay, let's pay attention. Something's going on here. It kind of kicks in a little bit, and then it's like, yeah, we're done playing around. It's time to go to work. And you know, they really do. I know exactly the moment in the song that you're talking about, and it's not like it goes from 0 to 60. You know, it's building up a little bit, but there's a huge acceleration that takes place right there, and suddenly you're in the song, and you know, okay, this is the song, right, that we're listening to here, and that, whether you've heard the studio version of the song or not, you can be listening to the song having never heard it, and that becomes very apparent to you when this takes hold as you're listening to the song.
Well, and you know, it's difficult to really describe the way that the song sort of evolves from, you know, the keyboard solo at the beginning to the guitar to this transition into the song itself that we're talking about. I mean, and one of the underlying sort of things about the sideshow is that we don't play the songs. We talk about the music to encourage people to listen to the songs. And for anyone who has even a latent interest in live hard rock of the 70s variety, Lazy is for you, I would say.
Absolutely.
And again, the lyrics of the song are, you know, you're lazy, stay in bed. You know, it's the singer is talking to a friend or a woman, and basically, you know, if you want to get something out of life, you know, you better get up and do it. It's really about that simple. There's nothing particularly, there's nothing deeper than that I glean from the lyrics, and you know, for this kind of music, you know, this wasn't music that people went to see for the sort of for profound lyrical insight. They wanted to rock.
Yeah.
And so the lyrics were secondary with this kind of music.
Well, and they also, though, on the same term, like this, and this song just doesn't stay on this, you know, kind of accelerated. They back you off a little bit, you know, at, you know, it kind of backs off into kind of a country is the wrong thing. It kind of there's a little bit of corniness just for it just backs you off of this just speed rocket you're on, backs you off a little bit, and then brings you back into it. Almost like does anybody need a drink of water here or something like that, and then brings you back into it. It's a good effect, right? To just and then bring you back into the song. So it's not like you're just listening to just this guitar solo going on. They are playing with you a little bit in in the power of the song and bringing it up and down a little bit as you listen to it. But it's the music that does it. You can hear the crowd as they're moving on song. You can feel the crowd's reaction to the music as they're playing it as well.
Well, and there's a harmonica break
Mm-hmm.
in here because it's a I mean I think that it's a bluesier number
Mm-hmm.
to an extent, and it doesn't sound hokey or anything. So not unlike if Mick Jagger were to play harmonica during a
Mm-hmm.
Stones song.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's not a harmonica player per se, but there's just something like that. It fits in well. I assume it's Ian Gillian playing the harmonica. I don't know that for an absolute fact, but I assume that to be the case. It's just it's a fun song. It's sort of enjoyably sloppy,
Mm-hmm.
but they hit the note. They hit the one together.
Yeah.
The band, they kind of loosen up at various points, but when it's time to come back together and have all the musicians land on the one, they do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and this is something that is shares an album with Smoke on the Water, Highway Star, Space Truckin'. I mean, definitive Deep Purple material. But I am of a mind that that side 3 is the best side on Made in Japan and one of the best sides of live hard rock that you could get in the early 1970s.
And I'd agree with that. And there's something else that I really like to draw from listening to this. We've for those of you that have been listening in, we've done a couple live albums here. We just previously did Neil Young's Live Rust. If you haven't heard that, I encourage you to listen to that episode, that episode of the Sideshow. But there's really something you can hear in both of these concert performances. And live albums are not just listening to a concert from start to finish. They'll pull, in this particular case, same thing. They pulled music from a couple different concerts, but you do get to hear the interaction with the crowd in between the songs. Again, it's not always the exact same concerts, but you get a feel for how these live performances were going. Now, you and I have been to a number of concerts. We've been to a number of concerts of more modern bands as well. And one of the things that I really see a dramatic difference in between concerts that I will go to and see today and concerts from back then is that interaction of the crowd. And a lot of bands, including very popular, well-regarded bands of today, feel a need to, tell the audience to make some noise. Swearing at the audience, come on, you motherfuckers, make some noise. Having to ask them to get excited about the music. And in this album, Made in Japan, same thing as I said, we just did another live album as well. You don't hear that. There wasn't a need to have to beg the audience to enjoy this music. And the even that notion of, well, why are people going to these concerts in the first place? I think that a lot of people, would a successful concert is when you've got people dancing. They're really looking to move, and a band that can make them move is a band that's making them happy. And it's, I guess, of all the things, I'm not looking for bands of today to play the same music from the 70s, which we've been talking about on our live albums. I just wish that they'd be able to produce the same type of excitement and joy and energy from the crowd without having to ask for it from the from the audience. And I think that that's something that bands need to think about when they're they're up there on stage, and what they're doing and what they're asking of their crowd.
The and and I agree with what you've said. That's certainly true of this album, and I think that I mentioned earlier that Deep Purple focused on live performance as where they were really going to shine, and that didn't detract from the quality of albums like In Rock or certainly Machine Head. There was Fireball didn't kind of rise to the same level, but where they really and the reason why I believe that this live album is the definitive Deep Purple record is because that's where they really shined, and that their songs, they were able to achieve more than they were with the studio versions. Now, now the version of Space Truckin' on Made in Japan, the live version, I mean, it's a side long, and that can drag a little bit. I mean, the structure of the song itself, they could do an edited version of that, and it'd be fantastic. So it kind of drags a little. And another thing, you talk about interaction between the band and the audience, not necessarily to gin up a response, but certain audience participation stuff can, if you're there at the concert, it's fun. Participating. Listening to it on a live album, not so much. I mean, like in the Woodstock movie when Sly Stone performs and he does some audience participation. Well, look, you're watching the movie. You're seeing what's been happening at Woodstock, and there's a certain value to seeing that if you want to learn historically about what happened at a big event. But just sitting and listening to music as opposed to watching a concert video or being at a concert, audience participation, kind of boring. And this album and the Neil Young and Crazy Horse that you mentioned, you sense that back and forth between the band, the musicians and the audience without that sort of hokier thing. And it's not so much that live quality that we're talking about right now, but just the way that the songs evolved into something more than their studio versions, with the exception of Space Truckin', the sidelong version on this one, they turn into something more, something, in my opinion, that's better.
Yep.
And you mentioned Neil Young. Neil Young on one of his songs said, "Live music is better. Bumper stickers should be issued," and I think that's true. And the live albums that we're talking about, I think, are examples.
Absolutely. Well, Deep Purple, Made in Japan, side 3. A great side, and some great insights, Mike.
All right. We will talk to you, Mark, next time.